On this Thursday night, gunned down. 2 Israeli embassy employees are killed outside a Jewish museum in America's capital.
They were murdered because they were Jews.
What we know about the lone gunman and what he shouted while being arrested. A blistering attack by Israel's Prime Minister.
You're on the wrong side of humanity, and you're on the wrong side of history.
What he claims Canada, France, and the UK are guilty of. Deadly aviation disaster.
There was no reason for this aircraft to be at that low-level altitude.
The fiery plane crash in a San Diego neighborhood. Plus, homegrown hotshot.
I never thought this was going to happen.
He's just the second Canadian to win the NBA's Most Valuable Player award.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. The killing of 2 employees of the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. is being condemned around the world. They were shot at close range by a lone gunman Wednesday night on the street outside a Jewish museum where they'd attended a reception for young diplomats. Today, Jewish community leaders gathered for an impromptu vigil.
We have to find a better way to a better future for Israelis, for Palestinians, for American Jews, for Muslims, for all of us. This cannot be the answer. Violence, the cycle, the endless bloodshed cannot be the best that we have to offer.
The suspect apprehended at the scene has been charged with murder. Witnesses say he told police he did it for Gaza.
Violence against anyone based on their religion is an act of cowardice. It is not an act of a hero.
Our coverage tonight begins with Jackson Proskow in Washington.
It happened just after 9 p.m. Wednesday as an event at Washington's Capitol Jewish Museum came to an end.
People were starting to leave. About 9:07, 9:08, we heard between 10 to 15 gunshots, roughly.
In that instant, 2 employees of the Israeli embassy were gunned down. Sarah Milgrim and Yaron Lischinsky were a young couple about to be engaged.
These were beautiful young kids who worked with us every day. And the loss is a personal one for everyone.
After the shooting, the suspect, who was initially mistaken as a witness, was let into the building.
And then he reaches into his bag and pulls out a keffiyeh and says, "I did it. I did this for Gaza." And just starts shouting, "Free Palestine."
Free Palestine!
30-year-old Elias Rodriguez was then taken into custody. Thursday morning, heavily armed officers were seen searching his Chicago home as investigators dialed in on a purported manifesto on social media.
He implied that he committed the offense. The suspect chanted, "Free, free Palestine," while in custody.
The event where the victims were targeted was focused on humanitarian aid for crises in the Middle East, including Gaza.
Sarah was a beautiful soul that was taken away from us brutally this morning.
In Tel Aviv, friends of the victims reacted with shock and disbelief.
They had nothing to do with Israel or Israeli's government policy, the war, nothing. They were murdered because they were Jews.
In the last 5 years, the FBI has reported a sharp increase in anti-Jewish hate in America. While the alleged gunman's exact motive isn't known, the shooting is being investigated as a likely hate crime.
The hate has got to stop, and it has to stop now. And this person will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
The FBI believes that this was an isolated incident and that there is no broader threat. Tonight, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he's ordered stepped-up security at all Israeli diplomatic missions around the world. Donna?
All right, Jackson Proskow in Washington, thanks. Canadian political leaders and Jewish leaders have all expressed their shock at the murders. Canada's Prime Minister says he's devastated and appalled. Mark Carney, along with the leaders of France and the UK, are being accused by Israel's Prime Minister of being on the wrong side of history. They have called Israel's expanded military operation in Gaza wholly disproportionate and say the level of human suffering is intolerable. Touria Izri reports.
I do swear.
Prime Minister Mark Carney was sworn in as an MP as the tragedy in D.C. reverberated in Ottawa. Carney condemned the shooting of 2 Israeli embassy staff, posting on social media this was a targeted attack against the Jewish community and a violent act of anti-Semitism. This hate is intolerable.
Canada and others
Hours after Carney offered condolences, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu released this video.
I say to President Macron, Prime Minister Carney, and Prime Minister Starmer, when mass murderers, rapists, baby killers, and kidnappers thank you, you're on the wrong side of justice.
Canada signed a joint statement criticizing Israel's conduct in Gaza as egregious and threatening to take concrete action like targeted sanctions.
These and other leaders have bought into Hamas's propaganda.
Netanyahu says the three leaders want Israel to stand down and accept the survival of Hamas, a group Canada recognizes as a terrorist organization. Ottawa summoned the Israeli ambassador Wednesday evening after Israel Defense Forces fired shots near two Canadians who were part of a diplomatic delegation touring the West Bank.
The Israeli state has the obligation to protect diplomats, and it was that obligation that was violated.
The IDF says the group deviated from its approved route. No one was injured and that it, quote, regrets the inconvenience. Carney wants a full investigation.
It's totally unacceptable. It's some of many things that are totally unacceptable that's going on in the region.
I'm not sure what was unacceptable. The fact that diplomats came close to Israeli soldiers in a combat area, which they know is active.
It's still early days of the Carney government, but one of Canada's former ambassadors to the United Nations, Alan Rock, says the Prime Minister has signaled more willingness than his predecessor to criticize Israel for what he calls its appalling actions in Gaza. Donna?
All right, Touria Izri in Ottawa, thanks. Palestinian civilians in Gaza are caught in the politics of all of this. For weeks, Israel has blocked humanitarian aid while continuing the military assault there. The UN says 90 trucks did make it through on Wednesday, most of it supplies for Gaza's bakeries. Foreign journalists are not allowed into Gaza, so Global News works with local journalists who were able to film some of the first loaves of bread being baked since aid resumed. As Redmond Shannon reports, it is a fraction of what's needed.
The first aid trucks in 80 days arrive in Gaza. With no time to waste, the flour is mixed, baked, bagged and shipped. The owner of this bakery in central Gaza says every loaf will be distributed by the United Nations World Food Programme. He says bakeries in northern Gaza have still not been able to reopen.
The issue is not just the lack of food, it is also the lack of diversity of food.
The UN says the 90 trucks allowed in overnight are far fewer than what is needed. It estimates a fifth of Gazans are on the edge of famine. Palestinian authorities say for some it's already too late.
We had info that more than 29 young children, infants and elderly lost their life because of starvation-related issues.
This woman told journalists working for Global News that when she came to get bread, she met a man who tried to sell her some for $20. Later on Thursday, as workers delivered more flour to a bakery, some residents appeared to take sacks for themselves.
We intend to have large safe zones in the south of Gaza, and the Palestinian population will move there for their own safety while we conduct combat in other zones.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says a controversial US-backed plan to distribute aid using private contractors is just days away. How exactly that will work and how long it will last is unclear.
But Netanyahu again said this week he supports a different solution long term. The US president's plan to annex Gaza, forcibly displace its population and build what Donald Trump called the Riviera of the Middle East. Donna?
Redmond Shannon in London. Thanks, Redmond. Israeli strikes were carried out on multiple targets in southern Lebanon today. Lebanon's state-run news agency describes the offensive as the most violent in some areas since a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hezbollah in November, where there were no immediate reports of injuries. Israel claims it targeted facilities of Hezbollah terrorists. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security has revoked Harvard University's ability to enroll international students, escalating President Donald Trump's dispute with the Ivy League school. The U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security is accusing Harvard of fostering violence, anti-Semitism, and coordinating with the Chinese Communist Party. Nearly 6,800 international students enrolled at Harvard have been told to transfer or lose their legal status. The university is calling the move unlawful and says it remains committed to supporting international students and scholars. The Trump administration has also demanded the university dismantle its diversity, equity, and inclusion programming, restrict student protests, and disclose admission details to federal officials. Well, Canada Post is just hours away from a deadline that could see employees hit the picket lines again for the second time in less than 6 months. There are no signs right now the union representing 55,000 workers is close to a deal with Canada Post. Felicia Perillo looks at where things stand as the clock ticks down.
Time is almost up for Canada Post and the union representing about 55,000 employees to make a deal. And right now, both sides aren't even at the table. The Canadian Union of Postal Workers said an in-depth review is still underway, but the offers fall short. It outlined a number of areas where both sides remain far apart, namely on wages, along with part-time and weekend work. The union also criticized Canada Post for rejecting a proposed 2-week truce that would have given the union time to review the new offers in detail. Canada Post says they have yet to receive an official response from the union.
We have told them that we are ready with a mediator to start talking at any moment. If there are clarifications needed, if there are questions that they have, the best place to do that is sitting at the table, looking eye to eye and just working through those.
Meanwhile, the Crown Corporation says in anticipation of another work stoppage, it has already noticed a decline in mail volumes.
Anybody that can move their product elsewhere has gone to the competition. Anyone that got burned by CUPW's last strike last year is not sending anything to us.
The possibility of a second strike in 6 months seems likely, according to one economist. Glenn Hodgson says there still seems to be a gap between the Crown Corporation's offer and the union's expectations, with little time to fill it.
The sad thing about strikes is that the workers who go on strike almost never make back the money that they lose, unless it's of a very, very short duration. So it's kind of a lose-lose proposition where the organization loses, the workers lose, and the broader Canadian economy is going to be clearly negatively affected by this.
In just hours, a message may be sent, but the cost could take days or weeks to become clear. Felicia Perillo, Global News, Montreal.
Automaker Stalantis is hitting the brakes on production of the Dodge Charger EV at its plant in Windsor, Ontario. Stellantis says it will pause assembly of next year's Dodge Charger Daytona RT because of President Trump's tariffs and because the electric vehicles struggled with sales. Stellantis does say it will continue to produce other pricier versions of the car at its Windsor facility, and there will be no jobs lost at the plant. Tragedy strikes a quiet neighborhood in the middle of the night. Coming up, the investigation into how a jet fell from the sky in California.
Hello, anyone in there?
In Australia, at least 3 people are dead, 1 man is missing, and about 50,000 people are cut off because of record flooding in New South Wales. Emergency crews are at their breaking point. There have been more than 500 rescues since Tuesday, and more torrential downpours are expected to drench the region. A small plane carrying 6 people crashed into a San Diego neighborhood early this morning. A music talent agency called Sound Talent Group says its co-founder, Dave Shapiro, was among the victims, along with 2 other employees. According to the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration, Shapiro is listed as the owner of the plane and has a pilot's license. It's not clear if he was flying the plane. Investigators are now combing through the charred debris looking for answers. Heidi Petracek reports.
It shook residents awake, a small private jet crashing into this San Diego neighborhood before dawn.
Crews arrived on scene to find multiple homes and cars on fire.
Felt like an earthquake. The building shook.
The area, largely made up of military housing, was evacuated. 100 residents forced to leave in a hurry.
The fire was just in a straight line. The street was on fire.
Miraculously, it seems everyone on the ground survived. although there were injuries.
Right now, this is still an active scene.
Combing through the charred wreckage is now the job of investigators tasked with figuring out what went wrong. Officials haven't identified who owned the plane, only saying it was a Cessna Citation, much like this one, coming in from the Midwest. Public flight tracking information shows a flight originating in New Jersey, making a stop in Wichita, Kansas, and then due to arrive at one of San Diego's smaller airports just before 4 a.m., suggesting the plane went down roughly 6 kilometers from its destination.
We do have a clipped power line behind us. NTSB and FAA are looking into that to see if that was part of the problem.
If it was at that level and struck a power line, then it was already in trouble for other reasons that are going to be investigated.
Sad that we learn from them.
Those lessons crucial for the entire aviation industry.
Everything we do in that cockpit, most of that we do has something to do with the previous accident. It's very important that we learn the truth.
Sorting through all this for answers will take time. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
Ahead, consensus on key priorities. Top finance officials from some of the world's largest economies meet in Banff. There are signs of unity tonight among global leaders who wrapped up a meeting of finance ministers in Alberta. Canada's François-Philippe Champagne says his G7 counterparts were able to find common ground in the face of a global trade war and uncertainty. Heather Yurex-West is in Banff. Heather, the ministers and central bankers agreed to a joint statement, but there was no mention of tariffs?
No, though tariffs were clearly the elephant in the room. This meeting is a precursor to the larger leaders summit slated to happen next month in Alberta. So host François-Philippe Champagne said his focus this week was to, in his words, get back to basics in the G7's role in supporting and stabilizing the global economy.
That's the essence of the G7. It's a forum for discussion, a forum for action. So people put issues on the table that they have, but at the same time, we are united in our resolve to restore as much as we can stability and also have more growth amongst the G7 economies in the world.
The discussions were frank, they were collegial, and they were productive across the board. And I think that sets the stage for a very productive leaders summit in Kananaskis.
We are the largest customer to the United States.
Canada's finance minister says he got along really well with U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. But as expected, little was done to really move the needle on the topic of U.S. trade disputes. Instead, the group agreed that while global economic and trade uncertainty has improved recently, they need to work together in order to achieve further stability and to address imbalances. Now, it has now been confirmed that U.S. President Donald Trump will be attending next month's Leaders Summit, which is slated to begin June 15th in nearby Kananaskis. Donna?
Okay, Heather Yurex-West in Banff, Alberta tonight. Thanks. Invaluable. Next, how this Canadian has risen to be one of basketball's brightest stars.
Haley Summers, thank you for everything you are for me, for our son Aries. You were the first person to show me what love really meant. I wouldn't be the man I am, I wouldn't be the player I am, I wouldn't be the father I am without you, and thank you for that. So,
that is Canadian basketball superstar Shai Gilgeous-Alexander thanking his wife for her support after he was named the NBA's most valuable player for the 2024-25 regular season. He goes by the nickname SGAA, and he's just the second Canadian to win the coveted award. He led the Oklahoma City Thunder to this year's best regular season record, and they are considered the favorites to win this year's championship, too. Eric Sorensen looks at what makes SGA must-see TV.
He is a marvel to behold on the court, the top scorer in the game and now the most valuable player. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander says he never really thought he'd be this great.
It's hard to not freak out. It's hard to not be a 6-year-old kid again. And I think that's what's allowed me to achieve it.
And he always emphasizes that it takes hard work.
worry about what's got me to this place, which is just working hard.
That hard work goes back to high school, including McNabb Secondary in Hamilton, where they celebrated today.
He was just a gym rat always.
Tom Fisher coached him, saw him work, study videos, always wanting to learn.
He was already doing the things that, someone needs to do to get to the level he's at today.
What makes Gilgeous-Alexander's game stand out?
One thing is his ability to create space. Left, right, to the rim, step back. Defenders are never sure, but he is always under control, somehow finding room to make a shot. In this case, he drives left, the defender commits, he breaks, falls away. Gilgeous-Alexander makes it look easy.
SGAA, as he's called, is also the leader of Canada's national squad, now one of the best teams in the world.
If you're Canadian, you have to be proud today, and really due to real Canadian kind of values, like hard work, determination, right? Like humility.
He's the first Canadian NBA MVP since Hall of Fame legend Steve Nash, who inspired the current generation, Jamal Murray, R.J. Barrett, and SGA and his cousin, Nickeil Walker. They're playing each other in the conference finals.
You can only imagine and get excited about all the kids around the world, but in particular Canadians that will be affected so positively, whether they're basketball players or not, by the way he carries himself.
In fact, the next gen at his old high school are already inspired.
It's amazing just knowing that you can come out of this public school, not very known, and do big things in the NBA.
Another amazing thing at McNabb Secondary, it took just a couple of hours to update the big mural to recognize Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, MVP. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
Nice one. That is Global National for this Thursday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada showcases Lower Queensbury, New Brunswick, an old farmstead near Thorold, Alberta, and Wassa Lake in Wassa, BC. Keep them coming. Please send your pictures of Canadian pride to globalnational@globalnews.ca. And thanks for watching. Neethu Garcha will be at the anchor desk tomorrow, and I will see you again next week. Bye-bye.